Hi, welcome to True Crime Talk. This is Kathleen, and this video is going to be another Missing in Georgia series video. This video is in regards to Deborah Jean McKneely. And Deborah Jean McKneely went missing in 1991. She was last seen on January 29th, 1991. This is the webpage of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation about her case. She lived at 3736 Union Church Road in Rockdale County, Georgia. Her weight at the time of her disappearance was about 155. Her height was 5'6". Her eyes were brown or are brown, and her hair color is blonde. And of course, she's a female. Let's see, the information they have for this case is Mrs. McKneely disappeared on January 29th, 1991, sometime between 7:30 a.m. and 4:45 p.m. The times when her children left for, then returned from school. The back door of the residence was kicked open, and a window pane in the door from the garage was broken. Blood was found in the house and carport. Nothing was taken from the home. A white pickup truck was seen in the area during this period. Her automobile, a 1985 tan and black Chevrolet S10 Blazer, was found the next day in DeKalb County, behind Decatur High School. Blood was found in the vehicle. The keys were left in the vehicle, and cash was placed in plain view in what investigators believe was an effort to bait the vehicle for potential car thieves. Investigators believe that at least 2 people were involved in the abduction. Anyone with information on this case should contact the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office at 770-918-6700 or the GBI tip line at 1-800-597-TIPS. Okay, this is a case I remember because I live in Georgia. I don't live in Rockdale County, but I live in the metro area of Atlanta, so I've heard about this case. And through the years, every few years or so, there'd be a news article in the newspaper or a news story on the local news about her case that investigators were still working on it, or they were trying to gather new leads, or they reopened the case after they didn't. It's never been closed, obviously, because it hasn't been solved. But they maybe didn't work on it for a long time. But then a new investigator would get put on the case, and he would get the media to do a story on it and try to get new tips and information about this case. But as you can probably already tell, this case involves a married woman who is going through a divorce. And she had 2 kids. I believe it was 2 sons, and she was going through a divorce, and she ends up going missing one day while her kids were at school. And as you can see down here, it says her automobile, a 1985 tan and black Chevrolet S10 Blazer, was found the next day in DeKalb County behind a high school. She lived in Rockdale County, and her vehicle was found in DeKalb County, and there was blood found in the vehicle. And the keys were left in the vehicle, and cash was placed in plain view, which leads me to believe, as it did the police, to believe that obviously somebody left cash and left the keys in there because they wanted somebody to take it. They wanted somebody to steal it, so either they look guilty, or it would mess up the evidence. It would make it seem like she was kidnapped by robbers or something like that, meaning whatever happened to her probably wasn't just a random robbery. It was probably a setup. And of course, since she's going through a divorce, the first person, or one of the main people the police would have looked at the time, would have been her husband or her estranged husband. This is the Charlie Project webpage about Deborah Jean McKneely, and as you can see, it has more pictures of her. She was 39 years old when she went missing. And these are other pictures. These are pictures of her in glasses. And a picture down here. It says Deborah Sucker 1991. So apparently, I don't know if all of these pictures, at least this one down here, is what she looked like in 1991, around the time she went missing. Okay, so as I said, she went missing January 29th of 1991. So it's the winter time, and she's missing from Rockdale County, Georgia. She's classified as endangered missing, obviously, the way her vehicle was found and the evidence found at the home. She was born April 14th, 1951, so she would be 73 years old today if she was still alive somewhere. Let's see, in the vehicle, a tan and black 1985 Chevrolet S10 Blazer has been accounted for. Yeah, so they've got the vehicle, obviously. That's where they found the evidence of blood in the vehicle, and they found the keys were still in the vehicle, and they found money left in the vehicle, and they found it behind a high school, as I said. Okay, distinguishing characteristics: Caucasian female, blonde hair, brown eyes. Deborah's nickname is Debbie, and her maiden name is Quarles. Her ears are pierced. Let's see if they have any more details. Deborah was last seen at the residence she shared with her two children in the 3700 block of Union Church Road in Rockdale County, Georgia, on January 29, 1991. She was apparently abducted from her home between the hours of 7:30 a.m. and 4:45 p.m. Deborah's 11 and 13-year-old sons were at school during that time, and she disappeared by the time the children returned in the late afternoon. They called 911 when they saw the condition of the house. So that is awful that her two sons, aged 11 and 13, came home to find blood in the house and stuff broken and their mother missing. The back door of Deborah's residence had been kicked open, a window pane in the garage was broken, and the phone lines were cut. Blood was discovered inside the home and in the carport area. There was no indication of robbery. Deborah's tan and black 1985 Chevy S10 Blazer was discovered on January 30th, 1991, the day after her disappearance. The vehicle had been parked at a housing project on Jackson Way in Decatur, DeKalb County, Georgia. The keys were inside the car and $100 in cash was scattered in plain sight on the front seat. Investigators believe this tactic was utilized to trick potential car thieves into stealing the vehicle. Blood was found inside it. Authorities believe that two people were involved in Deborah's presumed abduction. An unidentified white pickup truck had been spotted in the area of her home prior to her disappearance, but it is not known if the truck is connected to her case. Deborah and her husband, Donald McKneely, were going through a bitter divorce. They had been separated since November of 1989. On November 14th, 1989, Deborah filed a police report stating Donald had beaten her with a board. She told her brother and a neighbor that if she tried to divorce Donald, she believed he would kill her. Deborah and Donald's divorce was scheduled to be finalized at 5 p.m. on the day of Deborah's abduction, but it hasn't been proven that the divorce had any bearing on her disappearance. Donald has always maintained that he had nothing to do with her kidnapping. In 2001, Deborah was declared legally dead. Her case remains open and unsolved and is classified as a homicide. So, obviously, it looks to me that her husband probably had something to do with this one way or the other. If he didn't do it himself physically, he hired people to do it. But that's never been proven. They say he has always maintained his innocence, and obviously this case happened in 1991, so obviously the police never had enough evidence to charge him with anything, or and I don't know if the police were not just good investigators, or he was just very good at lying and getting away with this if he was involved in it. But it's usually when somebody goes missing and they're going through a bitter divorce, it very well could be their spouse was involved, but it also could be that she just happened to be going through a bitter divorce with a husband who had been violent toward her before, and she happened to just be home alone, and people were casing her home to rob it, and something went wrong, or she could have been home invaded and abducted for a sexual assault or something like that. But I don't really believe that. I believe this has something to do with her husband, who she was going through a divorce with. But apparently the police have no evidence about that yet. This is a WSB TV, Channel 2 in Atlanta article about this case that was done in May of 2013. And it says, investigator to reopen 22-year-old murder case. Investigators are hoping for new leads in the mystery disappearance of a Rockdale County mother. Deborah G. McKneely disappeared from her home in 1991, sometime after her two young children left for school. Investigators found traces of her blood inside her home and in a carport. There was also evidence of forced entry into the home, and her children discovered her missing and reported to authorities. Investigators recovered her SUV in Decatur, which also contained her blood. The cold case will be reopened after the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office swore in a new cold case investigator. He will be looking into 11 cold cases and focusing next on McKneely's disappearance. We want to see if there is something that crime labs can do now with DNA that wasn't available 17 or 21 years ago, cold case investigator Ronnie Godwin explained. It's been 22 years. I need to know where my sister is at. My family needs to know, said Stan Quarles, who is McKneely's brother. In a box, Quarles keeps many of the old news articles and police reports concerning his sister's disappearance. Quarles calls to Rockdale County every month to check on the case status. Quarles says he is pleased that there will now be a cold case investigator looking into her disappearance. I know who did it. I can't prove it, Quarles said. This is my big unsolved case, Captain Chris Taylor told Channel 2's Rachel Stockman. Traylor worked for 3 months nonstop on the case in 1991. He told Stockman that he believes McKneely was murdered. However, investigators were never able to locate her body. Stockman asked Traylor who he thought murdered her. Who do I think did it? I have a good idea. I am pretty sure it is a domestic-related incident, Traylor told Stockman. The day McKneely vanished, according to investigative records, she was going to sign papers to finalize a bitter divorce. And now, 22 years later, investigator Ronnie Godwin said he will begin tracking down any new leads and re-examining the case to see if anything was missed. The families deserve answers, Godwin said. It never leaves your mind. You think about this all the time. It never goes away. It never will, Quarles said. So as you can see, obviously, the cold case investigator put on this case in 2013, which is over 10 years ago now. And her brother, Stan Quarles, who is her brother, him and the police involved in this case all think it was probably her ex-husband who did this to her, but they just didn't have the evidence. And this article or this news story was done in 2013 and it's 2024. So obviously, maybe they didn't come up with any good DNA. I'm not sure what happened. So that's about where this case stands now. It's still unsolved, and there's no new DNA evidence that I've been able to find in my research. This is a website I highly recommend. I just came across it recently, but it's called Southern Strange True Crime and Folklore, and it's really good if you're into true crime. But it has a good article about Deborah Jean McKneely's case. It's sourced from a lot of newspaper articles about her case, so it has some good information. And this article was written in November of 2021. So we'll go over this article. It says, in November of 1989, 39-year-old Deborah G. McKneely contacted the police alleging that her husband, Donald McKneely, had beaten her with a wooden board. This incident prompted Deborah Jean to seek refuge in a battered women's shelter. Weeks later, she would file to end their 20-year marriage. Just over a year later, Deborah mysteriously vanished. The timing was significant. On January 29, 1991, she and Donald were scheduled to finalize their divorce and settle the division of their property and assets. Deborah Jean, anticipating a substantial sum, estimated her share to be worth around $700,000. That Tuesday, their two sons, ages 11 and 13, left for school around 7:30 a.m. The three of them were still living in the isolated family home in a rural area of Conyers, Georgia. It's unclear where Donald lived at the time. The school bus dropped the boys back home between 4:30 and 4:45 p.m. Instead of their mom being there to greet them like normal, they found a horrifying scene at the house. The back door was kicked in, a window pane in the carport was broken, and there was blood in the carport and on the kitchen floor. The phone lines were cut, which forced the boys to go to a neighbor's home to call 911. The McKneely's 11-year-old son told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, "I didn't know if it was my mom's blood or maybe the person who tried to break in. All kinds of stuff was going through my mind. I was thinking, is she all right?" Investigators determined that there was no evidence of a robbery at the home. Deborah Jean's glasses were on the floor. Her purse, watch, and jewelry were still inside the home. In fact, there was a new IBM computer and diamond ring sitting out in plain sight that wasn't taken. The next day, Deborah's 1985 tan and black Chevrolet Blazer was found about 20 to 25 miles away, parked in the lot of a housing project in Decatur, Georgia. The vehicle had blood inside, and detectives believe the perpetrators tried to entice someone to steal the car because the doors were unlocked. The keys and $100 cash were visible inside. And this is a picture of a 1995 Blazer similar to Deborah Jean's vehicle. It's not the actual vehicle, it's just one similar to it. Investigators stated that they believe at least two people were involved in the abduction, citing that two doors in the home were forced open. Rockdale County Sheriff's Deputy Scott Rhodes said the crime was thoroughly planned and well executed. Deborah Jean's family described her as a devoted mother who was fun, friendly, resourceful, and practical. She had worked as a teacher's aide. She had no history of disappearing or wandering off. All indications are that foul play is involved. There's nothing to indicate it is not, Sergeant Chris Taylor of the Rockdale County Sheriff's Department told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in 1991. Deborah G. McKneely accused her estranged husband of a campaign of terror in the year they were separated. According to court and police records, she said Donald had cut her phone lines at least twice. Let me stop right there. So he had cut her phone lines before, and her phone lines were cut the day she went missing. So that's an interesting fact, including once when he snuck onto the property wearing camouflage clothing. That is scary as heck. She confided in a neighbor as well as family members that she was afraid Donald would kill her. Well, in my opinion, it looks like she was right about that. Donald has always maintained that he had nothing to do with Deborah's disappearance. He told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in 1993, the police investigators, have totally wrecked my life for no reason whatsoever. But the pain I feel does not compare to the torment my sons feel every time this comes back up. Donald said that he fully cooperated with the police, giving them his fingerprints and a blood sample, and should have been immediately cleared. And this is a picture of Donald McKneely. That's her husband right there. His alibi for the day of the disappearance is that he was at his engineering job all day. Donald says his alibi was supported by dozens of coworkers. Police say several of those coworkers gave conflicting statements. Donald also claims that the police investigation caused him to be fired from his job. Police say his firing was caused by his refusals to cooperate with internal investigations by his companies. Donald claimed that his estranged wife was involved with other men at the time of her disappearance and offered them up as suspects in her abduction. Deborah Jean's brother Stan told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in March of 1993, "It's been traumatic. We have two young boys who would like to know what happened to their mother. They're angry, frustrated." The McKneely sons went to live with Deborah Jean's family after her disappearance. However, Donald was granted full custody of both his sons in May of 1992 after a bitter custody battle. In 1995, Donald's alleged longtime mistress sued her former employer, Prime Bank, for wrongful termination. In the deposition, she stated that she had been dating Donald since before Deborah Jean disappeared. She was questioned by Rockdale police regarding the disappearance and her knowledge of it. She claimed to have no knowledge but did admit to withdrawing cash from Donald's accounts during the relationship. Donald and the woman remained a couple up until her death in 2013. So obviously he had a mistress while he was married, and he continued on with that woman until 2013, until she passed away. I assume he didn't have anything to do with her death. In August of 1994, Donald filed to have Deborah Jean declared legally dead. This was granted by the court in 2001, at which time Donald was granted $69,000 worth of Deborah Jean's financial assets. In 2013, the case was reopened after the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office swore in a new cold case investigator named Ronnie Godwin. Investigator Godwin told WSB Atlanta, "We want to see if there is something that crime labs can now do with DNA that wasn't available 17 or 21 years ago. This is my big unsolved case," Captain Chris Taylor of the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office told WSB Atlanta. "Who do I think did it? I have a good idea. I am pretty sure it is a domestic related incident." Deborah's father, Jim, passed away in October of 2019. His obituary lists Deborah as having predeceased him. Deborah's brother, Scott, named his daughter after his missing sister. According to property records, the family home that Deborah disappeared from was owned by one of Deborah and Donald's sons up until 2020. The McKneely sons are now older than their mom was when she disappeared. If you or someone you know has any information regarding Deborah G. McKneely's case, please contact the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office at 770-278-8000, or you can email them at info@rockdalesheriff.com. So that is the latest information I could find regarding this case. I have no new information about the DNA, whatever became of it. I assume obviously they haven't found any DNA that helped them to name a suspect. And I'm not sure if I assume he probably is, or if her ex-husband is still alive. I assume he is, at least as of the time of this article in 2021. But this is her husband around the time of her disappearance. This is the vehicle, a vehicle similar to the one that she went missing in. They've recovered her vehicle. I don't know if after all these years they still have it so they can retest it for DNA, specifically the vehicle. I know they have evidence that apparently they looked into in 2013 to try to get DNA, but I don't know what evidence they still have. If they still, in 2013, if they still had the vehicle. Remember, this crime happened in 1991 before everybody had cell phones and before everybody had Ring doorbell cameras and security cameras. And so I guess they were not able to get any kind of video or footage of a suspect leaving her home, arriving at her home, driving down the road in front of her home. Um, Witnesses said they saw a white pickup truck. I have read no information that the police ever found a white pickup truck they thought was involved in this case. And so her sons, as far as I know, both of them are still living. And you wonder, what did they think all these years? Did they think their dad did it? Or they just thought, strangers came in and took their mom away? Now, it's interesting that some of his co-workers gave conflicting statements about whether he was there at work all day or not. Could some of his co-workers been his friends, his pals, and they lied for him, or just told the police what he told them to say? You would hope that just because you work with somebody, even if you work with them for a long time, or they like you, or they think you're a good person, and who knows what he said about his wife or soon to be ex-wife. He probably dogged her and said all kinds of horrible things about her. And so maybe he worked with male coworkers who, would lie for him because they thought he was like a victim of some mean woman who was trying to take him for everything in a divorce or something. But it's odd that it's the way the article talks, like it seems like more than one coworker would lie for him or gave conflicting statements, like either he was at work or he wasn't. said, he's an engineer. I don't know exactly what he did, what kind of office he worked in, what kind of business he worked in, but I mean, he was there or he wasn't. And if police ask me about a coworker, I mean, I'm not going to make up a story for them or lie. I'm just going to say, yeah, she was there. We worked together from, I don't know, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. in the same office or something. And except for the 1 hour lunch and when they left. I mean, I'm not going to lie for a coworker. So that's just odd information. I thought that could he have physically been involved in the disappearance of his wife and his coworkers lied for him so he would have an alibi that he was at work and he really wasn't at work all day, like he said. So that's concerning. And then also, even if he wasn't physically involved, obviously he could have hired somebody. And if police think two people were involved, then maybe if it wasn't him and a buddy, he had at least two other people go and do the job for him. And where the vehicle was found in Decatur, Georgia, it seems like maybe he was trying to make it look like like criminals, like career criminals, broke into his home or his former home where his ex-wife was and kidnapped her and stole the vehicle and hid her body somewhere or something. But why would, regular criminals, people she didn't know or have a beef with, why would they not take all the expensive items from her home? Why would they leave behind a computer, rings and stuff? Even if they were, even if, or if it's like a pervert, some kind of sexual assault thing, and they ended up removing her from the home, why they would steal something? There's lots of crime cases where even rapists, they'll go into a home specifically to rob a woman, but they'll also steal something from the home before they leave. So it would, any way I look at this case, it has to be in my mind, obviously her ex-husband was involved. But freaky things could happen. It could just happen to be that she was going through a divorce with a man who, from what I've researched, seemed like a jerk as far as if it's true that he, is violent toward her and all that. And they were, had a bitter, bitter, bitter divorce, but yet she just happened to be the victim of a random criminal or criminals on the day that they were supposed to settle the divorce in court. It's, you know, I mean, coincidences can happen. I'm thinking probably not, but anything is possible. The address that McKneely went missing from was 3736 Union Church Road in Rockdale County. So I was trying to find a picture of the home. I couldn't find a picture of the actual home because it sits on about 6 to 7 acres. Actually, it says 6.80 acres. So this is the picture they have on Zillow. Obviously, the home sits way back off the road, and they have a big tree here now, so you can't see the home. But this is the home now in today's time. Remember this happened in 1991. But as you can see, this is a two-lane road. It's a rural area still. I'm sure back then there's even less homes around probably and less traffic and people, maybe in 1991. Now there's an empty lot over here or a parking area. Well, it's empty now, but I don't know if it's a park. I think it's a park, oh, a dog park, an animal park. So I don't know I don't know if this was back there. Excuse me. I don't know if this park, this animal park, this dog park was back there in 1991. I doubt it. So it could have been even nothing over here across the street from them, from her house at the time she went missing. But as you can see, her home sat off a very rural road or in a rural area, but way back off the road on some acreage, so it's not easily visible from the street. So it would have been a scary place to be living alone or be home by yourself during the day when your kids are at school if you're going through a bitter divorce and you worry that your husband wants to kill you. If she really believed that, maybe she could have had some people around her at all times. But I understand you can't live in fear all the time. But if I thought somebody wanted to kill me, I would not be living or staying in a home by myself in a rural area like that. Just like she was a sitting duck. And back in 1991, they didn't have all the stuff that we have today, technology and stuff, to hopefully help you prevent from being a victim of a crime. I'm not blaming her. I'm just saying, because I'm a coward, I would not be staying in that house by myself if I thought somebody wanted to kill me. But this is a view from the sky of on Google Maps, what her home looks like in today's time. Of course, I don't know if in 1991 it had a pool and all this, but it's like there's the house, a swimming pool, and it's like an outbuilding of some type. And as you can see, the long driveway to the road. And all this area just empty. There's no houses close by because, like I said, the house is on over 6 acres. And back here is all these trees, these woods, forest area. And then on the other side of that is homes. But if you're alone in this house, I assume it's the same house. It could have been remodeled since then or whatever, but the house was built in 1973. And like I said, I don't know if the pool was there at the time or if this outbuilding or what, but from 1991 to 2024, this is still a rural area, kinda. So it hasn't changed much. So we can see how very easily, let's say somebody in a white pickup truck was involved in her disappearance, or the white pickup truck may have had nothing to do with her disappearance. But let's say if the people pulled up in a white pickup truck, you just turn down the driveway, go way up there, and you can pretty much do what you want because there's no surveillance cameras. If you cut the phone lines, she can't call for help. There are no cell phones back then. In 1991, people didn't have them. Most people didn't have them. So she was just home alone. The only communication she had probably was her landline home phone, possibly through the computers. 1991, I'm not sure where the internet was at in 1991. Obviously, they had a IBM computer in the house, but I don't remember in 1991 how good the internet was. Maybe it was dial-up internet at the time, but it's not like the internet is today. So her really back then, I'm going to assume her really only way to communicate that she needed help or she was in danger would have been a landline phone, and whoever cut the lines probably cut them before they even entered her home. So she had no way to communicate with anybody, and she's a woman by herself. And so let's say two men or even just one man came into her home. And I know police think that it was probably two people that came into her home because of, I believe, a front and a back door or a garage door and a back door being broken or whatever. But it could just be one person did both of those damage. Like maybe he tried to get in through the garage and it didn't work out. Maybe there's another door locked. Once he got in the garage, there was another door locked to get into the house, so he decided to go around back or something like that. I mean, I don't know what happened, but all I can imagine, just thinking, try to put myself in her shoes. She's a 39-year-old woman. She's home alone. Her kids are at school. She's just home alone having a typical day, probably waiting, for time to be for her kids to come home so she can greet them like she always did. And one person, and I'm going to assume it's a male, but it could have been a female involved. I'm going to assume one person or two people, I presume to be males, one or two men just came into her home, the fear she must have felt. And let's say she realizes somebody's breaking into her home and she goes for the phone and it's dead because she can't call for help because the phone lines have been cut. I mean, that is like a horror movie, just thinking about it. So the fear she must have gone through, and there's blood found in the home. I don't know how much, but obviously they think this case is a homicide, so they have good reason for that. Even earlier on, they thought it was a homicide. So, they have good reason to know that she was probably hurt in such a way that she wouldn't have survived. I don't know if it's from all the blood found in the home or their vehicle or both combined. Let them know that she obviously, she was taken away and murdered, or murdered in the home and taken away. But so I don't know how much blood was found in the home or how much blood was found in the vehicle, but there was blood found in both. So who knows what if she was beaten, hit with a blunt force object, had blunt force trauma from an object that she was beaten with, hit with fists, if she was shot, and she lived in such a rural area, if she was shot, it's very possible no one heard a gunshot at all. So she could have been shot, stabbed, beat up, hit with an object. There was no weapons found in the home or in the vehicle. So we don't even know how she was killed, and we don't know where her body is. Her body has never been located. So if you're one of those web sleuths who work on the Jane Doe cases and try to match up missing deceased people with the Jane Doe cases, this is one that should be looked at. And I know it has. I know web sleuths have been trying to find a match for McKneely because it would really help the case if they could find her body, I'm sure. And it could be her body has already been found, but for some reason it hasn't been, matched up to her. Her body could have been found and misidentified, or it could be, buried as a Jane Doe. Who knows? Because there have been times in the past, they make mistakes about when identifying bodies, or they find a body and they don't connect it with who it actually is, and then years later they say, "Oh yeah, this is her. We screwed up. We did, and the DNA, we didn't do it right or something." So there have been cases where authorities make mistakes in identifying bodies for whatever reason, or they don't realize that they have a certain body in their possession at the morgue, or wherever they store bodies that they found that they can identify. So Deborah G. McKneely went missing in 1991, and it's 2024 now, but this was the home that she lived in at the time she went missing. Let me pull out, and this is Union Church Road, and as you can see, it's a rural area. So it would have been very easy for somebody, even her husband, let's say if he really wasn't at work, to just come on to her home and do something to her. Because it's not like a neighborhood, not a city. You don't have like apartment buildings nearby, people looking out the windows. It's a very rural area, so it would be very easy for somebody to come up to this house and do something back then, because there were no Ring doorbell cameras, security cameras, cameras on mailboxes, cameras on vehicles, cameras at most businesses and stuff like that, not like they have today. And this is the Google Earth view. Just going to zoom in, see if we can see. Yeah. So look how long the driveway is from the house. We easily just drive up there and attack somebody in their home. Because, back then, without the camera, security cameras, what protection would a person have? Whether it's a woman or a man or anybody, other than a gun. And I don't know whether she had a gun or not, but obviously it didn't help her if she did. And who would know better the layout of the house back then? Because remember, the internet wasn't like it is today. The information on the internet would have been much more limited, if anything, about the layout of her home. And I mean, I can't even find the layout of her home or on Zillow. On Zillow, it just has a picture of the front of the driveway. There's no picture of the actual home. So who better would know how easy it would be to just pull in here and come up to this home and do something to Deborah? Who better would know than her husband or somebody she knew, somebody else she knew, if not her husband? Had to be somebody who knew the house or who gave information to the people who did this to her. If her husband wasn't involved himself, he could have given information to people who he hired or people he had on his behalf do something to his soon-to-be ex-wife, because her husband would know her routine. He would know that his kids were at school. He would know that he didn't have, kids at home sick or kids too young to go to school. And he would know the layout of the house and the best way to break in. So yeah, I definitely think that her husband, soon to be ex-husband at the time, knows what happened to his wife. I definitely think that. I mean, I think all the evidence leans toward this being a domestic violence case, like the investigators have said and her own brother said. But I can't get a picture of the front view of the house. But and I don't know if all these trees, shrubberies, and woods were like this in 1991, but I assume it was pretty much similar. Just look how easy it would be to just drive up to that house and do something. So I hope that her sons and other family members who are still living are still trying to get justice for Deborah. I hope they haven't given up. I hope, people still keep a lookout for her body as far as when they find deceased people. If they, Jane Doe's, I hope that they still will think of her. Who knows what could have the people who did this to her did with her body? She could be buried in the woods. She could be in water. Her body could have been destroyed one way or the other with fire or something else. And so it may never, ever be found. It hasn't been found in all this time. It could be so well hidden, it will never be found unless years from now they're doing construction somewhere and the bulldozer happens to find some bones, which has happened many times in other cases. But trying to think what her ex-husband, if he was involved, what he would do with her body or what he would tell others on his behalf to do with her body. I don't know, but remember, he's an engineer. He's very smart. Obviously, if he was involved in this crime and got away with it all this time, obviously he's very smart. And if he was able to get coworkers to maybe possibly lie for him, he's obviously very smart and very manipulative and very cunning if he did those things. So it's just my opinion. But my theory on this case is that obviously the ex-husband knows what happened to her. And I wonder over the years if his sons ever questioned him about it, or they just thought he was totally innocent, or as they got older, or when they became adults, they knew he was involved and they just let it go. When his sons were younger, I saw them interviewed, but I haven't seen them interviewed anytime recently. And maybe my research, I just haven't found it, but I've seen articles where her brother was speaking about this case as late as 2013 and stuff, but I haven't seen any more articles about, if her sons have said anything about this case or not. And it could be, maybe their father's still living and they're very loyal to him and they actually believe him, or it could be, life just moved on and they don't want to deal with it or think about it anymore. Or it could be maybe their father's deceased too and they just don't want to think about it or deal with it because they know no matter what, their mother isn't coming home. She's been gone for so long. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation's website says her vehicle was found behind Decatur High School in DeKalb County, Georgia. And this is Decatur High School's location up here. And then down here shows 3736 Union Church Road, which is where her home was. And apparently it's about 30 minutes to get from her home up to where her vehicle was found. So possibly maybe her body could have been dumped somewhere between her home here and where they left the vehicle up in Decatur High School or near Decatur High School. But it also could be there was more than one vehicle involved, like somebody drove her vehicle off and their partner in crime took her body away and to who knows where, somewhere far off. This is Atlanta over here, but this is Decatur High School and this is her home. So it's about a 30-minute drive. Let's zoom in up here. And this is Decatur High School up here. And I'm not sure what all was around in 1991. I believe, some apartments, housing projects. But this is where her vehicle was found. And there's multiple routes they could have took to get up there. But did the killer or killers or the people hired to do the killing, did they live in or around this area? Or whoever did this, did they live somewhere else and they just left the vehicle there, to make it look like somebody in this area did it, but it's actually somebody else who has nothing to do with this area, who didn't live in this area, DeKalb County, Georgia. So they could have, whoever drove her vehicle off could have went several different routes. They could have took Interstate 20. They could have took 155 up here. They could have took Snapfinger Road, which in today's time it says is fastest route now due to traffic conditions. So at this time, at least right now, this is the fastest route according to this, but just by 1 minute. So which way did the person travel to get her vehicle to Decatur High School? Well, it really doesn't matter because, like I said, back then, obviously they don't have any video evidence, surveillance footage from any business or home about which direction her vehicle traveled. They just know that where it was located, where they found it, but they don't know how it got there, which direction. Well, obviously they know it went north from her home because it had to get here, but they don't know which route the people took to get there. So was her body in the vehicle at the time, or is her body transported from her home in another vehicle to somewhere? There was blood found in the vehicle, but was that from her body being in the vehicle, or her body or her living self being in the vehicle? Maybe she wasn't dead yet. Or was it blood from the people who hurt her? Did they have her blood on them and then they transferred her blood from themselves to the vehicle, to her vehicle when they drove it up here? So obviously we have no idea, but this is Deborah Jean McKneely, who went missing on January 29th, 1991. Her vehicle was found the next day in DeKalb County, Georgia, behind Decatur High School. And she went missing from her home in Rockdale County at 3736 Union Church Road. At the time she disappeared, she was 39 years old. Please, if anybody out there has any information to offer to this case, please contact the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office at 770-918-6700 or contact the GBI tip line at 1-800-597-TIPS. And you can remain anonymous. If you want to give an anonymous tip, you can do that. There are ways to do that. So if you have any information at all about what happened to Deborah, please contact authorities.